Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today, Improving Roadway Performance with Highly Granular and Accurate INRIX Roadway Analytics. We'll have 4 subject matter experts presenting on this webinar today. From INRIX, we have Ted Trepanier, our Senior Director of the Public Sector. Also Bob Pichu, our Senior Economist and author of our newly released INRIX United States Hotspot Study. Finally, from INRIX, I'd like to introduce Chris Bridges, our Director of Analytics, Product Management. Finally, I'd like to welcome our special guest to the webinar. Lee Woodcock joins us from Atkins, an INRIX partner. Lee is the Global Product Director for Intelligent Mobility at Atkins. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly review a few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted and will be throughout the webinar. If you have questions during the webinar, please go ahead and submit them through the GoToWebinar questions window. We will answer all questions at the end of our presentations. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the recording, and our recording will also be published on the INRIX resource page of our website. Without further ado, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Ted Trepanier, who will give a brief introduction. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Allie. So go ahead and advance the slides. I'm still just seeing the opening slide. All right, so there's the folks' introduction. So this is our agenda for today, and Allie covered this. We'll basically do just a very short introduction to INRIX. I think most folks know who we are, but I will provide just a short overview for those of you who may be new to INRIX. Then Bob will go through the Hotspot study that he led. Chris will provide us an overview of the roadway analytics platform, and then Lee is going to talk about the Atkins use case. So go ahead, next slide. So this graphic essentially shows kind of where INRIX sits in the transportation ecosystem. So INRIX is a transportation data service provider, right? And we essentially see the things that we see transforming transportation in society today. So we refer to these as the ACEs. So autonomous vehicles or highly autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, this move toward electrification, transportation system and vehicles, and then the sharing economy, the shared economy. So this is the introduction of things like Uber and Lyft and how we actually see that even moving into the public transportation space. So these are kind of the drivers of what's changing our world beyond just the standard growth that we've obviously seen for as long as we've been transportation professionals. And of course, right now we're seeing a resurgence, right? So we went through a dip with the recession where we actually saw some travel demand back off. But I think everybody has seen now that that demand growth is actually kind of back with a vengeance, right? And so these things are out here actually changing the trends. Then on the other side, we have this new introduction of big data and how it's being used in decision making and how it can help us to deal with these things that are changing in the transportation system that essentially we need to be studying and reacting to as professionals. Go ahead, Allie. The next, we'll just talk briefly about the sources of the INRIX data, right? And so it's broad, and I'm not going to read every bullet to you. Obviously, I'm just going to point out a couple of key things, key items. And so one is that, you know, we aggregate data from a number of sources. You know, I've been at several conferences recently, and a lot of folks will say, well, you're the folks with cell phone data, and that's just a really small part of it, right? And so one of the key elements is we're getting data from connected vehicles, so directly from vehicles themselves, certainly mobile devices, also a lot of connected fleets and that sort of things, but then also from agencies, right? So a lot of agencies share data, things like road closure and incident information. There's a lot of sensor data that's online in real time. Then in some places we do work with cellular companies. We input special events. we curate incidents manually, and so there's a lot of things that we mine as far as data sources, and so it's very broad is really the takeaway from this. Next slide. And then the kind of the INRIX special sauce, if you will, is to take all this data and pull it in, and we run it through a number of different types of analysis. And so coming out the backside is a number of different products, and so the data gets filtered a number of different ways, right? It doesn't just go through one transformation. So as an example, we pull in GPS data and sensor data in real time, and we run that through what we call a fusion engine, and that creates real-time traffic data, right? And where we calculate the speed on every segment of the roadway every minute. This is certainly the number one thing that we're known for, right? Is high-quality real-time data. And then we archive that and build analytics on top of it, right? Which is another thing that folks really know us for. But there's a number of other types of data sources that we pull in and build other products. And so like the parking system, right? And so real-time parking data both on street and off street, parking analytics, whole platform of services to connect the vehicles or open car initiatives. And so there's other elements and other things that we work on. And so each one becomes its kind of unique product and targeted to a unique business sector. And so if we go to the next slide, kind of just see an overview of the different business units that different verticals, as we refer to them, that utilize the INRIX data products. And certainly the automobile industry is a primary user of our data. And if you look at the titles of brand names that are listed here and their icons, right, if you go into those vehicles and you look at the navigational display, you see real-time traffic and routing, incidents and parking and those sorts of services, and those are things that we're providing to the automakers. Public sector, again, and this is where we're going to focus the breadth of our discussion today, is across public sector and enterprise. You know, public sector are the folks that own and manage and operate the roadways and public transportation systems that we all rely on. And we provide both real-time historical data and analytics and other services, you know, as key things for our public sector clients. The enterprise is about, or businesses that use transportation data for essentially business decisions and making better business decisions. And this could be actually as small as one individual making a property selection decision. And so our partnership with Windermere, putting some transportation data right on a website so folks can actually see how long it's going to take to drive to school or work from each particular house they may be thinking about buying, up to collective folks like IBM and big business that are making financial decisions with transportation data. And I think everybody kind of understands the mobile and media. Certainly there's a lot of traffic broadcasts out there, and there's a lot of folks that package up that type of information for public consumption in a number of different ways. And we deal with obviously a lot of companies that work in those focus areas as well. So one more slide for me, Allie. So this slide, again, don't be afraid, I'm not going to read all the bullets to you. So this slide does represent kind of how I see the public sector ecosystem. So as transportation professionals, if I'm a public agency and I'm managing a roadway network, I see 4 responsibilities, and typically agencies will have missions and goals aligned in 4 areas. And so one is we have a system out there as it sits today, right? And every day we have a responsibility to operate that system as efficiently as we possibly can. Related to that is managing demand on the system. And so we think about now not only things like optimizing traffic signals, but how do we provide information? How do we do things that maybe allow folks to shift modes more efficiently, so we actually more efficiently manage the capacity on our system? And then strategically adding capacity. Right? We hear all the time this phrase that we're not going to build our way out of congestion, and that is certainly very, very true. And in any big city in the world, we're not going to build our way out of congestion. It's just not financially feasible, and in most cases, it's actually not what society wants. They don't want to see freeways that are 20 lanes wide, right? And so, but that doesn't mean they don't want us to build anything, right? It's about building the right things in the right places to unlock the capacity that the system can have. So prioritization is a big element, right? Understanding where our choke points are and the magnitude of each one, so we can think about this hierarchy, and then the rate of return on dealing with each one, right? What's our return on investment going to be if I unlock a certain bottleneck, and that could be what kind of capacity do I unleash all the way up the road if I unlock a certain bottleneck. And it could be actually building things other than roadway, right? It could be building a part of a public transportation system or an intermodal connector as well. And so that might be about understanding trip patterns, so we can better understand maybe where to put the next park and ride, or which park and ride should be expanded, or if we're going to introduce a shared use shuttle, as an example, that we hear more and more transportation agencies talk about as a neighborhood collector, right? Which one can reap the best benefit of that based on the travel patterns that we're looking at? And then sitting on top of everything, we have safety and security, right? So we're responsible for the safety of the traveling public. And so overarching, over everything that we do, we think about the safety of the travelers and what can we do to make their journeys safer as safe as possible. And so we certainly have systems that help agencies enhance the safety of the system. So with that, I think next slide is transition, where I will hand off to Bob and let him talk about the recent study that he published.
Okay, well, thank you, Ted, and thank you all for joining us on this call today. My name is Bob Pishu. I'm the senior economist at INRIX, and we recently, just last month, released the U.S. Traffic Hotspot Study. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to head to our website, download the report, and enjoy the read. And so to begin, just as an introduction, I want to start off with why we did this research. And as many of you on the call know, transportation funding and fixes and everything is always an issue. Budgets are, always strained, especially public budgets. And so, but we've seen, a lot of state and local agencies stepping up. I can think of, LA's Measure M, or here in Washington State, where we're kind of home based at, we've had a $16 billion state package, and New Jersey just passed a $16 billion capital program. So we're seeing a lot of state and local agencies step up, yet despite that, unfortunately, those budgets still remain strained. So what we say is, at least in this report, if the goal is to, maximize societal benefit, using road dollars, because we're just focused kind of on the road system with this study, it's important to at least locate and analyze the toughest traffic hotspots for these possible fixes to really unlock a lot of benefit. And just a high-level overview, we'll go over this later, but we placed an economic methodology onto this, and as you can see, it's a large problem. So $480 billion cost in lost time, wasted fuel, and carbon emitted over the next 10 years. So first of all, I wanted to get into what is a bottleneck or a traffic hotspot. Now, for this study, we identified over 2 months of data, March and April 2017, we identified nearly 108,000 hotspots comprised of more than 800,000 traffic jams. So what is a bottleneck or a hotspot? It's a spot on the road where traffic jams occur. And how we determine that is when speeds drop to 65% of the reference speed or the speeds found at night. Generally, those are free flow. And how we calculate the impact of those hotspots or bottlenecks, it's the length of the queue, how long the queue's there, and the number of times that queue forms at that location. And so with that, we come up with what's called the impact factor score, which allows us to identify and rank these bottlenecks or hotspots. Now, keep in mind, the tool is agnostic to the cause of the bottleneck. So most of us know of, the typical traffic bottleneck where 4 lanes go into 3, or, something physical there on the roadway, but it can also be, a construction project, or, just similar, or just basic, supply demand imbalance where congestion is present. Down in the LA area, 405, the 101, those types of areas do see chronic congestion. Those also register as a bottleneck. So here's the screen, and Chris will go over more on this later. But here was the output of the study that we did for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan statistical area. And this was the top traffic hotspot in our study. It had an economic cost of about $2.3 billion over the next 10 years. And what you're looking at up top, I show the top 5 of 6,097 traffic hotspots. And on the top portion there, you can see how many times the traffic jam occurs, how long is the average maximum duration, and the average length. And on the bottom left is just a visual representation of that on a map. And on the bottom right, you can see those traffic jams by day, by time of day, and by length. So this interface gives a robust picture of what's going on, and you could click any one of those and find out all of the details that you need to analyze these hotspots further. So what did we do? How did we come up with the cost of congestion methodology? We took those impact factors, which are, again, the duration, length, number of traffic jams, and we converted them into time loss. We had to make a few assumptions. We looked at, functional road classification 1 through 4, so FRCs 1 through 4. So that's anything from national interstates to, arterial and collector roads. So obviously, if you were looking at specific, if you want to know bottlenecks on a specific road like like I mentioned, 405, you would input your own metrics into this. So each road is different, right? We know each road has a certain length for auxiliary lanes or collector distributor lanes, or it varies throughout the corridor. So those things can be really contextualized to what your needs are. But for this, we had to make some assumptions, and so we did on the number of lanes, the average vehicle occupancy, and the average vehicle density per mile. And those are things that a DOT has at their disposal. And so, like I said, those can be really contextualized to the specific use case that you have. Value of time was based off of DOT figures taken to 2017 dollars, and fuel prices and the social cost of carbon from government sources as well. And we also included a congestion factor that is published by the Department for Transport. So here were the top 25 traffic hotspots analyzed and their economic cost over the next 10 years, discounted to present day dollars. Not too surprising. Los Angeles definitely bears most of the brunt of traffic hotspots, and we'll get into that in a little bit, with 5 in the top 10 and 10 in the top 25. One interesting thing here is that these are only 0.04% of all the hotspots we analyzed, yet they made up over 5% of the total impact. So obviously, these are places where congestion occurs. And a lot of these cities and local DOTs and MPOs and state governments are really tackling things at these spots. So we took a look at, the one in the DC metro region, the top one, that's by Fredericksburg, Virginia. And, here Ted mentioned earlier about strategically adding capacity, right? And the Virginia DOT is actually doing that currently VDOT and Transurban are adding 2.2 miles of express lanes to the south. They're in that area currently doing that. And then they also have planned and funded other projects there to reduce congestion. So they're also adding a 3-lane collector distributor road southbound, exactly in that direction, to double the amount of capacity between Route 17 and Route 3. So, you know, in many of these spots, you know, they're already being tackled, and every day, you know, DOTs and MPOs are working hard to really, you know, ease the burden at some of these by strategically adding capacity. Another interesting thing here that we found is that Washington, D.C. has 3 hotspots on this list, yet these 3 are responsible for 15% of the region's total impact factor. So you can kind of see some of those relationships to where, you know, strategically adding capacity or managing demand or whatever the local strategy is for that area can really make a difference. So here they are, all of the 108,000 hotspots aggregated, all of that information aggregated at the metropolitan statistical area wide. Again, somewhat unsurprisingly, you know, LA, New York are at the top, and that's about what at least I expected going into this. But interestingly, though, one interesting thing I added here was the per capita rank. So actually, if you adjust for, you know, this is just one way to look at it. There are many other different ways, but even just adjusting for population, we kind of see, you know, LA is #1 overall and #1 per capita. But a place like New York, #2 overall, yet 17th per capita. So, you know, on the per capita level, traffic jams do not impact, you know, the average New Yorker the same. Obviously, it's because of New Yorkers' travel habits. You know, Angelenos, you know, travel much more. You know, like I believe per capita, it's like 22 miles a day they drive in LA. In New York, it's around 16. So we see that reliance on driving in LA, which, you know, like I said, Measure M and things like that are starting to provide alternatives and really building out those alternatives for LA in a huge way. And so that should go a long way in LA. But another interesting thing, though, is Stamford, Connecticut, you know, ranked 22nd overall, yet per capita, #2. So the way I kind of look at this and interpret that is they kind of have, you know, that smaller metro feel, but the traffic feels like a major city. And so, so those are just some interesting takeaways from what we did here. Again, because we looked at so many different areas and different types of roads, we had to make assumptions, and so that's how it plays out here. But for your locality, you can really enrich this data to make it really work for you from the Bottleneck tools output. So again, just to quickly summarize, you know, the $480 billion over the next 10 years, just in these 25 metro areas. We can, you know, extrapolate that nationwide. And what I did for my extrapolation was about 2.2 trillion over the next 10 years. And that's about what I expected as well. It's around that 1% of GDP mark, which, you know, groups like McKinsey and other analysts say is about what congestion costs. It's probably a little bit of an underestimate. We didn't take into account, you know, lost productivity and things like that. But again, that's kind of the beauty of it, is that for the purposes of, you know, managing your road network or whatever, you know, however this use case may work for you, you can add to it. Again, you know, these spots can be looked at to maximize societal benefit, and this tool is one of, you know, one of a suite of products that Roadway Analytics has that can really allow you to drill down and help out on the road network. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Bridges, Director of Product Management, to talk more about the product.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here, and we're going to go through some slides about an overview of roadway analytics, and then do a bit of a demo. So roadway analytics is a really powerful tool. It's really powerful for managing urban mobility, and it has extremely granular data available to it in XD segments, which we'll go over in some subsequent slides. It's a subscription-based tool. As you've seen, it's great for identifying hotspots and trends, precision location, etc. This is a way to dial into finding out that $480 billion potential spend that Bob was talking about, to prioritize roadway improvement projects, even address media. So one of the ways roadway analytics helps is with traffic operators keep drivers safe and moving, efficient management of traffic. It helps with study of peak hours of travel and time and reliability, minimizing traveler delays by identifying bottlenecks, as we discussed, reduce congestion, ensure safety on roadways by understanding typical patterns and conditions and incidents, and pinpointing underperforming locations. Also with traffic flow, helps traffic planners such as yourselves with traffic flow for both growth and normal planning. For example, using existing infrastructure efficiently, identifying bottlenecks, enabling urban mobility as we discussed, understand the impact of road networks and changes, etc. Planning more efficient movement of freight and new modes of transport, including autonomous, which is bigger and bigger cities. Also, public officials managing public perception, as we talked about the press a minute ago, to keep commerce moving. So with traffic operation, priorities can help minimize traveler delays, ensure infrastructure oversight and policies are in place, and touch on future growth and innovation, the flow of commerce, and public expectations management. Roadway analytics helps you do these by giving you the tools to assess impact of options for long-term sustainability, communicate plans and progress. Our graphs and reports and just the output of our data and the study of it helps with that tremendously. We'll go over some of that in the demo, how to get to that data, and influence the storage of media with that data. So we give you, through roadway analytics, access to the richest source of traffic data that there is. INRIX XD traffic offers the broadest range of coverage and detail in the industry. We have over 300 million sources of this traffic through real-time GPS probe data and hundreds of market-specific criteria that we use to affect traffic and identify construction and road closures and real-time disruptions, etc. We have the most granular data in the industry, the XD segments, which we'll go over, and we have more coverage, a total of 5.2 million miles across 47 countries. And our reporting and visualization is second to none. Makes findings easier for key stakeholders to understand, helps to inform, the outputs that we generate in our zip files, et cetera, and then the screen grabs we have are quite excellent. And also just to help shape the story for media, to do deep dive analysis to help form that story and inform. To talk about XD, I mentioned XD segments. So our INRIX XD traffic is the most granular in the industry, and it's a staple of accurate analysis of traffic. It includes near real-time and historical and predictive abilities in traffic conditions, traffic influence routing, times, bottleneck identification, congestion, etc. Our data is the most granular, and it's down to segment sizes, in many cases, less than 100 meters in length, based upon GPS points and the position of those points specifically. And as I said, we have 5 million miles of roads worldwide identified, 1.7 in North America alone, 1.6 million miles in Europe. And our data is historic. It is an archive and present data going back a full 3 years. And all that, we'll show that in a minute, but that data is all available to data downloader and instantaneously in the tool. So how does XD compare? So the standard before that was TMC, which is traffic message channel, still in use. It's quite good, but it's not as granular. Not as highly granular for traffic flow reporting. There are some gaps and overlaps, and it has kind of a long segmentation. So we've vastly improved on that through INRIX XD segments. Increases road coverage and spatial granularity, and it addresses some of the basically segmentation distance shortcomings of TMC. So this is a visual to show previous, flow, traffic, segmentation identification with TMC. You see that the granularity is a bit less. We have greater coverage. We have greater segmentation by roadway than anyone in the industry. We have, with 100-meter segments, dial very far in. With generally a TMC, you have a mile or a kilometer. Get into some of the features of the user experience, some of the tools. So in Roadway Analytics, you start with the overview page that simplifies study creation. Here's where you create corridors. As you can see on the left, there are saved studies that have been created. These are created through the tool, through corridor selection. You create dates, multiple dates for the same corridor study. And then you can adjust the granularity and save it, and that's there forever for as long as you want to use it and need it. You can create as many saved studies as you desire. Intuitive map-based feature all over the tool. And corridor selection specifically here really helps you define your study location. And it can precisely pinpoint any corridor and also do it by region. You can select an entire region by zip code or by county, by city, etc. It's very powerful. And like I said, the granularity tool allows you to select minute by minute or 5 minute or 15 minutes or hours. Down to performance charts allow you to do flexible reporting and graphing and determining congestion areas on the roadway and the segments that you've selected in your study. You can show by speed or historic speed, etc., travel time, and it really helps in showing, like in this example, we've selected 2 different time periods and it shows a delta in between those. Helps you find the differences in speeds and congestion to identify and solve for them immediately. And the congestion scan, we can have 2 slides on this. This one is an example of dual directional corridors selected. And in this tool, we'll show how when you hover over these different time slices selected, you can see there are 4, 1 for each side of the roadway, 1 for each direction. It shows the bottlenecks the congestions that are existing in those time periods and in that section of the roadway based on the kilometers or the miles indicated on the right or left. This is another view showing our tool that is a time ticker that automatically selects based upon the times, the dates that you've selected in your border study. It will go from left to right and walk through each time minute by minute if you select it by the minute or by 15 or the hour based upon the study you created. And it'll highlight those on the right side on the map view, congestion and speeds and all the changes that occur during those times. So our bottleneck tool goes through and visualizes the data that Bob was using in his study. And I'll walk through this powerful tool. Basically presents an archive of bottleneck locations. We have a 3-year archive. But again, it quantifies them, allows you to walk through and determine specific locations of bottlenecks, download the data, and mine it, and have it historically if you wish, or present out these for study. Our data downloader tools, one of our most powerful features. For any corridor study you create, any region study, you can download all the data for it based upon the date ranges you've selected. So whatever you select, you can download here, and all that data will be made available to you in CSVs. This is an example of a study done for the City of Calgary.
So Chris, let me interrupt you 1 minute. I'm not sure how many more slides you actually have to go through. So we had one person commented via the question box that it would be easier to see your slides if you went into slideshow mode, so that use the whole screen. It's hard to see some of the graphics on your slide. And I know you intend to do a demo too, so I'm not sure if that's possible.
I can, but it'll take a second. I can do that, but I'll have to advance all the way to slide 38 after I do the screen share. After I start the slideshow, I'll advance. It'll take a second, okay?
Okay.
I'd like to do that. Bear with me. Only a few more, I promise, everybody. And there are also only a few more slides. Oh, interesting. I can't advance any further.
Okay, I'll take the tool. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the City of Calgary slide. Okay, back to you.
So briefly, it's a little bit obstructed, so there we go. There are only 2 slides left, so thank you for bearing with that interruption. This is a study of the City of Calgary done with the goal of identifying congestions and also in another part of the study, bottlenecks, to determine areas that will benefit from road improvements. So we provided this study and helped them with it, and it was quite beneficial. because of the deep dive analysis ability. And as you can see up top too, there's a color threshold bar, and that's completely customizable. And so with the City of Calgary, we customize the colors and the segmentation of those thresholds specifically for their needs. And it created an incredibly easily usable and potable study, immediately safe and also repeatable. In the end, it was used to prioritize urban mobility investments for them. The last one was LA Department of Transportation Road Diet Project, which was a study of removal of a lane for cyclists to see what the impact would be on the city's residents. And so eastbound and westbound were studied and were found to obviously have different times of day when congestion would be potentially higher compared to the past when congestion was interestingly okay and lower. Maybe people just avoided the street. Now I think we're gonna just, this is a summary, just saying this is a turnkey solution, gives you immediate access to the data. It's subscription-based pricing, and now I'd like to go and show you how the tool works. Okay. I'll try to make this as big as allowable. What we're seeing is the roadway analytics interface. And this is what we talked about before, which is the overview area that allows you to set up corridor studies. And initially what you want to do is navigate from left to right. You can see I have saved studies already, and I'm going to dive into a couple of those in a minute just to show you some sample reports we've already run. So on the left side, you can select region or corridor with this tool. And this is where we showed the map before, and it can select King County or enter a postal code, do a search, and then that highlights that area, and you can save it as a saved study location. Next way is to do it based on corridor selection individually. So we can highlight corridors if we wish. And then that will pop up, and we can select specific road segments as part of that study, or select by segment specifically, and we can do a search of roadways within the same tool. And what comes out of it is a set of segments on specific roadways that then can be saved as part of the saved study. And with that, then you add dates through this interface. You can add several date ranges at once, and even determine by day of week what those date ranges pertain to. For example, if you specify weekend days, then you probably don't want to include the days of the weekend. And again, you can specify as many as are needed for your study. And finally, granularity. So we select granularity of the report here. 1 minute is the tightest and probably the most immediately useful for quick dives after you've done studies. We can expand out the minutes to an hour. So let's start by looking at a region study. A region study's bottleneck report. So the bottleneck reports and this data from it are what Bob used in his analysis. And you can see down below, the corridor selected above is represented below, and also the data on the time series chart is updated for it. So as we walk through, each of these are individual corridors that are showing bottlenecks across King County. For the date range I selected, which is week from 10/2 to 10/8. You show an impact factor, which is a factor of the occurrences, the max duration and the max length. And see here, 122 corridors were identified, and we can study each one of them individually. Studying one at a time, if you dive in, it gives you a summary of each one based upon the impact factor, the maximum length, the date, and time of day. This can also be output, so we can download. Any of the reports we have are downloadable, and they'll be downloaded quickly into a zip file for you to use. So next I'm going to change to a specific corridor study instead of a region study. As you can see in this one, I've selected a bunch of date ranges, so we have a lot to choose from, and it's by the minute granularity. So this is congestion scan, and said in the presentation slide, you can actually change the settings of each of these color thresholds that are set by the congestion indicators. So on the left side, you can choose the metric. In this case, it's congestion percent. You can also choose speed. What we're seeing here are pillars that are displaying the date ranges that we've selected in the study. You can also unselect or select, so we can hone in on specifics. So in this case, I'd had Saturday and Sunday as a specific date range to compare it to that same week for that actually a month period for all those. So then I can see, this is specifically weekend, highlighted, congestions, showing in red. It shows on the left side the distance from the start to the end of the corridor that was selected as part of this. I selected I-5, certain segments. If we hover over, based on time of day, it's showing about 4 p.m. right here. I can hover and click and select and show the exact situation that was happening on that corridor at that time of day and the segments that are having the congestion. Also change to satellite view. Take a screen grab. And on the right side, you see the map updating. So if I go back and select the other date ranges, it gets a bit more dramatic. You can change the rate at which time advances across this chart, which changes on the right side. You can see the congestion changing. The spots clearing up in green or getting worse in red or yellow. And again, this is also downloadable. Now I've just downloaded all my congestion scan data for all of these date ranges for speeds. Finally, performance charts. So looking at the week view, I look at speeds. This is a pretty useful view because we can see right away my date range is highlighted through each pillar for each day and immediately identify differences in speeds across different times of day, across different dates. Looking at the day view, it can become quite dramatic, showing, for example, just an easy example is the change between in orange Saturday and Sunday versus all other days of the week during 8 and 9 a.m. Speeds increase quite a bit on I-5 and get pretty close middle of the day, which is kind of interesting. And then again. So this helps you immediately identify your zones of speed increase or decrease, and also can change the metric into all the other metrics that are available in the other charts, like comparative speed or congestion, etc. And download the data. Finally, our data downloader tool. Data downloader is very powerful and incredibly useful. Any study location that you're currently viewing, you can download all of the data at once in CSVs for deep dive analysis and even machine learning if you so choose. It's based upon the date ranges you've selected before. So if your study covers a week or 2 weeks, that's what you download. If it studies a year, that's what you download. So you can choose the name of the study. I'm sending it to myself. It's going to update me in email. I've selected all these metrics. I can select to show rows that have real-time only speeds. I don't want that. I want them all. Include UTC, date, time. I can even add time per day filters if I wish to carve up the data I'm extracting by only certain times of day. And then when I run the report, it tells me where my report is running. Click on My Documents, and it shows that the report is queued. When it's completed, it looks like this. The zip file contains 2 CSVs, one for metadata and one for the main data that gets out. I want to thank you very much for the pleasure of going through the tool with you and going through Roadway Analytics overview. And now I'm going to pass over to Lee Woodcock, who is Global Product Director for Intelligent Mobility at Atkins.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to just talk briefly around intelligent mobility and also some of the initial user cases that we're exploring with colleagues from INRIX. Could we click on the next slide, please? Thank you. So intelligent mobility for me is a new way of thinking about how we connect people, goods and services across all transport modes. It's a real opportunity to reimagine infrastructure, but fundamentally for me, it's about people, and it's about enabling a really positive customer experience as people transition those different challenges around between different modes of transport. So technology and data are fundamentally important to enabling intelligent mobility, but it is about people and it is about behavioral change. And that's kind of how we're exploring some of the initial challenges around breaking down the silos of the transport system. But it creates new opportunities, and the next slide touches on some of those areas. So we see an evolution away from some extent the physical infrastructure to a new digital infrastructure, a new digital world that enables smarter streets. It encapsulates things like connected and autonomous vehicles, new commercial funding mechanisms, and new transport platforms, all the way through to adoption of smart transport technology, and also new emerging business models such as mobility as a service. And we're seeing that crop up globally as people are experimenting and demonstrating what mobility as a service might look like going forward. If we go on to the next slide. So this crazy diagram is an image of the M25, the orbital motorway around London, but arguably it could be any busy network in the world. And really for me it encapsulates some of the core components that we need to consider around intelligent mobility and the leveraging of data and technology and innovation. So the first area is around data exploitation and visualization. We have more data available to us than we've ever had before, So actually, how do we harness that? How do we leverage the availability of data? How do we fuse some of that together and create new insights from that data? The second area is around journey management across all those different modes. How do we break down the silos of transport systems and create that positive customer experience, but enable that through one payment system as well? So as customers, we're not having to pay 3 or 4 different times when we transition those modes. It's all through one single wallet. The third area is around connected and autonomous vehicles. We do see the emergence and promotion of a lot of driverless cars, but also we need to think about how we leverage autonomous vehicles across land, air and sea, but also some of the earlier opportunities in the near term around connected vehicles and the difference they can make to management of networks and free-flowing networks overall. The fourth area is around mobility as a service, this journey angel that integrates your transport needs into one overall service proposition, aggregated through one service provided and tailored to you as an individual based on your needs and requirements. And then the final area, which is absolutely critical to the first 4, is about cyber security and resilience. How do we actually protect people's privacy, transport assets and network operations as we see the increasing threat around cyber security, for instance? And the next slide just breaks that down into a little bit more detail in terms of some of the component parts that we consider around the intelligent mobility. So it's about smart cities and roadways, it's about data exploitation, and about our journey management and mobility as a service. From initial visioning exercises and city planning, all the way through to design, and also creating some of those insights around data and data exploitation. But then once we've done all of that and we've kind of identified solutions, how do we actually adopt some of the behavioral science techniques to make sure that the investments that we're making in solutions are fully adopted by people, so we're maximizing the return on that investment and the overall business case? We probably all worked on projects where actually it's a really fantastic solution, but we've not necessarily leveraged and realized the full benefits of the business case because we've not necessarily taken people along the journey with us. And so the adoption of behavioral science is absolutely important to the overall approach. Thank you. Go on to the next slide. So this partnership with INRIX is really exciting for us. The whole landscape around intelligent mobility is incredibly complex, and I firmly believe that no one organization can answer all the exam questions on their own. It's about collaboration, it's about new business models and new services, and the partnership with INRIX is one of a number of critical collaborations in this space to help us move forward. So some of the examples that we're looking at include exploring connected vehicle applications, also looking at some of the traditional traffic modeling that we undertake, and actually how can we leverage the benefits of the data that's available. And as Chris and Bob have outlined, a lot of the detail and the granular data sources, the disparate data sources, to create maybe a better answer, a more informed answer through some of that traffic modeling than some of the traditional techniques that have been adopted in that space in the past. We can utilize the data and the roadway analytics platform very easily and quickly to undertake before and after assessments, for example, as part of traffic signal timing reviews. Modeling and simulating the impact of connected and autonomous vehicles on road networks, critically important going forward to really understand, for instance, what kind of market penetration of autonomous vehicles needs to happen on the road networks to unlock some of the benefits that we're talking about. And at what point does that penetration start to actually have a pivotal change on how we need to manage cities in a different way? It can also support, for instance, the review of public transport fares. So understanding where hotspots exist across cities, and actually when we look at how we support some of that modal shift, where we can draw insights from the INRIX data to really drive a change maybe in the fare structures overall to support people moving out of their car into public transit. And we can also review the impact and optimization of roadworks and roadworks planning through leveraging the data overall as part of some of that activity as well. So just some examples around how this partnership is enabling a different kind of thinking, different kind of solutions, and embedding in the Atkins business at the moment. So just an overview on intelligent mobility and a little bit on the partnership in action. Thank you. I'll head over to Ted now, I think.
Thank you very much, Lee. That was great. Appreciate it very much. So we're going to go now to questions, and so I'm going to moderate. And a few of the questions are somewhat short, and I'll just go ahead and provide answers if I know them, and then I'll pass off to the other panelists, as needed. And if they get harder, more sophisticated, then I'll look for other folks to answer. So we're going to start off with one that I'm going to have a quick comment on, and then I'm going to pass it to Bob. And I'm going to pretty much follow the order in which the questions were submitted. So if you did submit a question, you'll kind of know when you'll be coming up to your question here. So the first question was, it kind of starts with a comment and then a question. So spending millions of dollars to alleviate a hotspot that results in moving traffic 500 meters to the next hotspot may not be a wise investment. Commentary is we couldn't agree more. How is the interaction between adjacent hotspots taken into account? And so I'm going to pass that to Bob for comment.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, and I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, at least with the top part, it's about, really analyzing the benefit cost, being able to show that the benefits outweigh the costs. Obviously, in a lot of urban areas, it is extremely expensive to just expand, a highway by a lane. And so, yeah, so that needs to be taken into account. I'm not quite sure on the second question exactly, but what we would do, what I would say here is to, the roadway analytics tool allows you to dive into those hotspots and what happens on adjacent roads. So that's something where, for example, the congestion scan might really come into play and be an option.
Thanks, Bob. And I will comment as well that, what we have here with the Roadway Analytics platform is a set of powerful tools, but they're certainly not the only tool you're going to use. When you look at the bottlenecks, this gives you a ranking of the things you're seeing on the system now. If you're talking about something that is millions of dollars of investment, alleviating a hotspot, right, you're going to pull in a model to see, what does alleviating that bottleneck do for your system? And if it's just going to run into another bottleneck, right, you're going to need to think about those things collectively. And I think, that's certainly professionals do that all the time. Next question is, what support is available for conflating XD segments to TMC segments or other linear referencing systems? And so a couple things are just real quick about that is when you download the data from the platform, it comes with a location file. So you do get starting and ending lat long points for each segment definition. And so that's one tool that's available to be able to correlate how the XD segments relate to TMC segments. We also can, for clients, provide XD segment shape files, right? And folks that are working with TMC segments will have shape files for those, and we can actually provide both. And so in a GIS system, it'd be typically getting those two shape files would allow you to see how one segment references to the other. We don't provide actually like a conflation service from one to the other. We have some products that are in one system and some in the other. And so if you need something deeper than that to understand, I encourage you to just contact us individually, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper. Next question is XD still in the INRIX.RIDIS.org? I know the bottleneck ranking tool is still TMC. And so and there's a couple of questions here related to the RIDIS module, the RIDIS analytics platform. And the RITIS analytics platform is built on top of the TMC codes, as is referenced here, and all of the performance measures that are in that platform are TMC based at this time. Now, the platform has got the flexibility to incorporate XD data, right? And so that hasn't been done right yet, but it is something that University of Maryland is looking at, and it's really a customer type of decision. So if you're a user of that platform and whoever you are working with for providing it, whether it be if you're getting it through INRIX or you're getting it from the university or as part of the Vehicle Pro project, go to the person who's actually servicing your account and talk with them about that if you're interested in getting XD. Spiral diagrams is the next question. Are spiral diagrams still available? And spiral diagrams are one of the visualizations in the RITIS platform. They're not in the Roadway Analytics platform that Chris just demonstrated. Given the granularity, what is the average or approximate sample size or number of devices providing data for a single speed measurement, speed at a time on a segment? And so that's a very common question, and it's actually not one with an easy answer. And the reason for that is that sample size is quite variable. As you might imagine, the density of the data coming into INRIX is related to a number of different things. And so one is the region. There's more data in some places than in other places. The roadway type, and especially the volume of traffic on a roadway, right? A roadway with 100,000 ADT obviously is going to have a whole lot more data than a roadway with 15,000 ADT. And then time of day. So again, if you think about traffic distribution and we're getting samples of the traffic on the roadway, it's going to be very different during the peak hours. It is going to be off peak as it is going to be in the middle of the night. And so there is no single answer to that. For folks that work a lot with INRIX data, we dive deeper. We have metadata fields in the data that show you exactly, kind of give you a sense of the quality of the data that was coming into INRIX at any given minute, and it's something we can talk with you individually as you look at the products deeper. The next question is, does INRIX provide demand data such as OT, demand matrices, or estimates of volumes on segments? And the answer to that is yes. And so again, I would encourage you to contact us individually, because it depends on your use case what the right product is for you to look at that. We have that type of information. We also work with a partner, Streetlight Data, who does a lot of work in this area and has platforms written around not just OD matrices, but location data services. And so there is a number of options there to look at. We also have volumes in a couple of different flavors. And so one is like a volume profile, which is something that we can produce, like typical volumes by time of day per segment. And then inside the Streetlight Data platform, there's more volume, running volumes in 15-minute segments. And so there's different ways to look at that, right? And so we can talk with you specifically about that. Next question is, how do we use the analytics.inrix.com website instead of the inrix.ritis.org website? Doesn't seem to be the same login. Doesn't have a register link or anything like that. So yes, they are separate products. And so if you want to use the analytics.inrix.com platform that Chris demonstrated today, it is a separate login. And if you go to that site, then there is a place to register there. I will comment that we do provide trials, so you can sign up for a free trial, and I think we are going to provide some information on that with the follow-up email that we send out from the webinar. I think we're going to send you a link to be able to get you registered for a free trial of the platform if you're interested in that. Okay, so next question looks like it's for Lee. It's just come in. So it says, hi, Lee. Thanks for your presentation. Could you provide some specific example of clients you've worked with to answer data science questions using the INRIX Roadway Analytics tools? And obviously, we're not asking you to divulge anything that a client would consider to be confidential, but I'll throw that over to Lee to comment on.
Yeah, no, I'd love to, and I can probably do it offline with the individuals raising the questions subject to confidentiality. Apologies. I'm going to have to dodge it.
So, Chris, we'll let Lee follow up with you one-on-one to respond to that question. And so the question is, the last question I have listed on our board is, if your agency is already purchasing XD data, how do you get access to INRIX Analytics? And so it depends on the agency. And so I would encourage you to contact us individually, because there's a lot of folks I've noticed that are actually logged in that are party to a data license that would allow you to have access to the analytics. And so it's as simple as asking, and we can get you turned on. For other folks, they belong to a consortium where they may have only purchased the data only and not the analytics, in which case it'd be something for you to look at in a future procurement. Either way, we can get you connected to look at it as a free trial, and happy to do the quick look, do the research to see if your agency is one that is party to maybe an umbrella license that would already allow you to have paid access, and I can look that up for you very quickly. So just go ahead and give us a separate email, and we'll look that up. And actually have your email on this question, so we'll check you individually, and then if anybody else has a similar question, if you send a follow-up email, we can check your license agreement. So that's the final question I see, Allie. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Allie for some closing commentary.
Great. Thanks, Ted. I'd like to thank you all for joining our webinar today, and a very special thanks to Lee, Ted, Bob, and Chris for their time and expertise in regards to intelligent mobility, big data, and analytics. I just wanted to remind everyone this webinar has been recorded, and you will all be emailed a link to the recording within 24 hours. You'll watch for that email. It'll come directly out of the GoToWebinar platform, and it'll also include a link to sign up for a free trial of INRIX Roadway Analytics. I'd highly encourage everyone on the call to go ahead and just register. We can get you started same day, and it's a really fun tool to play around with, as you saw through Chris's demo. So I think that would be a great next step, so you can really get your hands on it. Again, it can be accessed through that email that you'll all receive as a follow-up to this webinar, but if you want to grab it today, you can just go to the INRIX.com website and go to our Roadway Analytics product page, and there's a link to the free trial there as well. So if you want to get in and play around with it, I would encourage you to do that. If you have any questions in the meantime, we invite you to visit our website. We've got a lot of great information, case studies, brochures, etc. there. And again, if you still have questions, just please feel free to follow up with that email address on the screen right now, bizdev@inrix.com. We're happy to have just a one-on-one conversation with you at any time. Thank you all so much for your time, and that concludes our webinar for today. Have a great day. Thank you.